Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We're joined today by longtime friend Tony Vasaturo, who is the principal at Tony Vasaturo Basketball Training. He is a player development coach, works with NBA guys, all the way down to youngsters first picking the ball up. Coach, thanks for being here today.
I appreciate you having me.
All right, let's dive in. Take us through your background. How did you get into the other side of the game?
Oh
All the
yeah.
way back at the beginning.
Yeah, man, that's a great question. So I'll give you the most condensed version I can. Basketball, where I grew up in Connecticut, is not that big. I'm very fortunate enough to have a father who is shaped my future in life in a lot of ways, but he was big into sports and he refed college and high school basketball, would take me to a lot of basketball games and just I fell in love with the experience of sport through him. And I think basketball is the vessel. I tell a lot of people and they're surprised. I actually played Division III football for a year at Aurora University in Illinois. Shout out to the Midwest. And so I just had a unique journey, just trying to explore a bunch of different avenues. I think it's important to try a lot of different things. And I knew I wanted to coach basketball. I didn't know in what capacity. I always thought, well, I have an uncle in Connecticut who's a high school PE teacher and coach, and he has a phenomenal life. He's super happy. And I'm like, why would I not want that? And then as I got more and more involved with basketball, being around camps and these types of things in the local Connecticut area, I worked this Connecticut basketball school. It's actually the oldest tenured camp, I think, in North America. I would work UConn's basketball camp, Central Connecticut State, WestCon, like all the local ones. It started to expand. And I was like, man, I really have this hunger for success. And circling it back to my father, he said, whatever you choose to be in life, be the best at it. And so I'm like, if I'm going to go this coaching route, I want to see how far it can take me. And I took that challenge. I had to actually coach Howie Dickenman. He's retired now. He's a longtime Central Connecticut State head basketball coach, coached at UConn under Jim Calhoun, won a couple of national championships. He was just this ultimate blue collar guy. And I think he kind of saw something in me. And I'm very fortunate enough for that. He just took me and he said, hey, man, listen, your dad's he never coached at a high level. You never played at a high level. You're going to have a huge uphill battle to get to where you want to go to coach at the collegiate level. However, with your work ethic, like it can be done. And so he laid out a blueprint of what I needed to do. And I just took, and at that time I was actually playing college football. And I was like, man, I need to put myself in a situation where I'm uncomfortable and I need to learn how to grow. And I transferred down to the University of Central Florida. And I didn't know a single soul at the basketball program. I barely knew anybody down there. I had some family in Orlando, but what I did was the first day of school, I dressed in a suit. I printed out some of my resumes and it wasn't that impressive at the time. I was like 19, 20. And I just literally walked into the basketball offices and I was like, hey, I should have done more research, to be honest, like people's backgrounds and those things. But I was just like, hey, I want to talk to somebody about the possibility of what it takes to work here. And very bold. You can't just usually walk into a Division I men's basketball program and just be like, hey, I'm here to work. There's a lot of loopholes you need to go through. But they were like, hey, we're going to put you into a 2-week trial and throw you in the fire. And I'm not going to lie, like I remember being super nervous. I got yelled at a couple times. I made some mistakes, but that's the best way to learn is to just be integrated right away. So I'm really grateful for that entire staff. Donnie Jones, Sean Finney, Brendan Sir, they just took me under their wing and were like, hey man, this could be a home for you. So I spent the next 4 years there. I worked my way up to a grad assistant pretty quickly, timing and just work ethic and all these things. And so I had a lot of responsibilities at a young age and was thrown into the fire and it was awesome. And so that was my foundation of basketball at a high level. And I was 20, right? So a lot of guys are still playing or trying to figure out what they want to do or whatever at that point in life. And I was like, I know. And I thought that was my advantage and just my work ethic that my parents instilled in me at a young age. And so I was at UCF from 2012 to 2016. And I knew going into that 2016 season, I was like, man, I just don't know if this is for me anymore. I was finishing up my master's degree. And I felt not like an emptiness, but I wanted more, like a different challenge. And I craved like the connection aspect of basketball, let alone the technicalities. And so another bold move, I think you just got to be willing to do these things. I packed up my pickup truck. Again, shout out to Papa V, my dad. He's always been there for me. He got in the truck with me. We just hit I-10 from Florida all the way to California. And I didn't know a soul in Southern California. And I moved out here. I had a cousin who was stationed in the Navy at the time. And he was like, yo, I'm getting transported in like a month, but you can sleep on my floor. And I was like, I got 4 weeks to make this thing happen. And as soon as I got out there, I just hit my contacts, hit my network. Ironically, at that time, a really good buddy of mine, Dustin Albert, been on the pod before. He just took the grad assistant position at Long Beach State. So I was about 2 hours north of where I was. And so I was like, okay, there's a basketball connection, and the rest was history, man. He actually told me to reach out to. He said, "Yo, there's this guy on Instagram known as the Shoe Guy," and this was back in, like I said, 2016. I wasn't that big on Instagram or anything. Like I wasn't that interested in it. And social media can be positive, but I'm still not that big of a social media guy. However, I was like, hey, let me just shoot my shot. And at the time, Jordan Lawley, who is the Shoe Guy, he just blown up, but he was accessible. He had like about 100,000 followers at the time. I shot him a DM. I was like, hey man, I'd love to come by sometime and just learn from you. Popped in the gym, felt this dude's energy and presence from day one. Like I was like, wow, he's impressive. And as he started to grow his business, I was just like, hey, we can do something special in this area. And we never looked back. That was back in 2016. As soon as I got out here, and we've been able to build something very unique with other people in the Southern California area, a lot of pre-drafts, a lot of pros, a lot of kids. And so it's been fun, man. And that's where I am today.
Love that. Thanks for setting us up that way. I would love to know when you made the decision to leave Illinois, maybe you were in Connecticut at that point. You can tie these threads together and go to UCF.
Yeah.
Now, are we just map on the wall throwing darts? Did you have some plan? Why?
No, I mean, there was a connection there. I actually going, coming out of high school, because I had family in Orlando, I spent from like age whatever 6 to 18 every one of my spring breaks. It's colder up in the Northeast, so every one of my spring breaks I would fly down to spend a week with my family and my cousins. And I just loved the area. And I was like, man, if I could go to school, like this would be a perfect place. And so I just loved UCF. And coming out of college, I wish I had better grades. Excuse me, coming out of high school, like I was a misguided. I had, again, a great support system, but misguided individual. Like my freshman and sophomore year, I didn't understand the importance of academics. And so I was just like sports and friends and all these things. And then I remember like my sophomore year, my dad was like, hey man, if my dad owns a business, and he's like, if you're going to take over my business or you're going to do anything in life, like you need to go to college, and like you are going to go to college. And so I was smart, but I didn't apply myself. And I was like, okay, I need to change this. And by the time I turned everything around, I think I graduated high school with a 3.0, but I was doing a lot of catch up work from those first 2 years to get to that point. And so I just went to Valencia Community College in Orlando. I got deferred at UCF from the application process. And I was like, and while I was waiting, I was like, dude, I'm going to take the same class load 2 miles down the road. And I was already going to be living with my great aunt and these things. And I'm like, being an out of state student, I'm like, I'm just going to do that. So I was already in Florida for 2 years prior. And I had a couple of buddies of mine that we grew up playing college football that we kept talking about getting back together, playing football. And one of our teammates was in Illinois. So that kind of brought us up there. And then being up there for halfway through the football season, I was just like, I don't love it like I used to. I actually did leave this part out, but I was fortunate enough to get on the basketball team at Aurora. And because it's a Division III school, there's really no limitations. I was very thankful. The head coach at the time, his name's James Lancaster, him and this other guy, Lance Robinson, they took me under their wing and they're like, hey, you can coach as a student. And so I got my first, I felt weird. I'm 20 years old. Half the kids on the team were older than me. And I was like, I was a student coach. Now there was no limitation. So I was on court. I was in every meeting. And that kind of fueled that fire. And that's where I was like, man, I got to get to a Division I school. And I knew UCF was the feeder to Valencia. So I didn't just pick a school, throw a dart, but that's a great question.
All right. So from there, when you mentioned that I played college football, which clearly you played high school football, I'm not sure what else you played besides hoop, but you've listened to me on this before and how I tend to rail against the youth sports industrial complex and it destroying sports. But in your current situation where you do basketball training, and I'm sure you have people that are trying to specialize way too early. What would your message be for coaches listening, for athletes, if you could put it into a box and give it to them about the importance of avoiding specialization until you absolutely have to? Or
Yeah.
maybe you don't believe that, but I look at it in regards to what'd you get out of football that benefits you?
No, I think that there are so many life lessons. Take sports aside, like the skill development, that's huge, right? But I think the lessons you can learn from each sport and just the different people. I have some of my best friends in lives are kids I play football with, kids I play basketball with, or coach basketball with. So there's so many different walks of lives and in different backgrounds. I feel like you're missing out on if you don't play all those sports. And I think they're taught differently. I don't know nowadays and age, I don't truly believe. I think there's still really great coaches that hold kids to a high standard in the youth level. I think take football for an example. There's a different level of intensity and physicality and demand. And so it teaches you how to be tough, like physically, or how to not cut corners. There's really no, you can get exposed really quickly in football if you're not prepared. And that's just in the football world. I think going back to your question, I think it is so vital for kids to play multiple sports because they don't really know what they love at that age. And I could care less if this offends parents, but it's really parents that are fueling the specialization and they're trying to, hey, put a kid in a situation where they're trying to live vicariously through their kid and not in a good way. I think good parents live vicariously through their kids when they take a back seat, but I think it's parents that are like, hey, you're an 8-year old and you're going to be doing basketball 12 months of the year and you're going to be doing training and all these things. And like, we have a lot of kids that have come through our process and our culture who aren't kids. They have extreme amounts of pressure on them and they don't know what it's like to be a child because it's just they're in a gym all day or everything that they're doing is about their output and their outcomes as opposed to learning how to fail. And I think from when we've seen kids who, I'll take soccer for an example. I don't I have a basic understanding of soccer, but it's so vital in every sport. Footwork is the foundation to success. And when you see kids who have been successful or played soccer for a long period of time or just any other sport and have that crossover, they're so much better at their primary sport because they have that foundation and understanding of, hey, I understand how to move in different ways and I was taught as opposed to just like doing your one sport specific thing. And then I think with that, there's burnout. Push comes to shove. I think that the biggest thing is, hey, there's so many kids who are 15, 16, 17 who are looking at maybe they're not getting the college offers that they wanted and they're thinking that their entire journey was a failure because they put so much into it, or they're just like not in love with the sport anymore because they were into it or forced to be encompassed in this one individual sport from age 8, 10, 12, whatever it is. And it was never really like their true love. And they just felt like maybe I couldn't say no or owe it to whoever's doing this for me. So I think it's so important for kids to, yeah, I'm not a parent yet, but I have my first kid on their way. I'm going to let my daughter pick whatever she wants and support her. And I hope that's multiple things for a really long time. And if my child comes to me at age 10, 12, 14, 16, they're like, hey, dad, I want to do this. Can you help me? I want to be all in. Then that's a different conversation. But I think it's up for the kid to make that decision.
So how do you balance that given the line of work you're in to help young humans and their parents navigate what the world would like us to believe that you and I both know is not true, right? So it's, hey, you used to have this 3% chance of playing college athletics and the transfer portal, it's probably a half of 1% now. So
Yep.
like, how do you help balance the, actually, this is my business and you're not helping your kid?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think if I was business oriented first, I would keep the transaction the primary focus, but I'm not that way. So maybe I'm shortcoming myself a couple $1,000s a year or whatever the case may be. Like, but I really don't care. Like, I got to look at myself at the end of the day and be okay with who I am. And I'm a huge reason why I got into the private sector is I tell it like it is, and I have whatever individual is in front of me or a group of individuals, I want to have their best interest in mind. And so if parents are coming to me and they're like, hey, or the kid, we want to play in college, I'm like, hey, man, you just hit the nail on the head. The chances are pretty slim because everyone wants to be at the Division 1 level. And that's not to be a deterrent to people in their dreams. Like I'm a full supporter and people are capable. But if you're outside of the ESPN top 300 and you're an incoming freshman in college, you're probably not going to play Division 1 basketball at a high level, just calling a spade. And so realizing that there's different avenues and different things to go about, I don't really promote going to try other sports and other things. I promote going to see other people and learning from different coaches and putting yourselves in different environments because I can't teach you everything you need to know. And so I think when, a predominant amount of my clients are that eighth grade and up so they're like a little bit older and they're starting to look ahead, right? Hey, college is on the horizon, or there's so many competitive schools down here from Mater Dei to Santa Margarita to Bosco, you name it. There's like the cream of the crop for basketball programs. So there's a lot of pressure and for motivation for kids to play at these top programs. And I want to help them navigate those things. I wouldn't tell And if I have an 8-year-old, 10-year-old client, I'm not having those conversations with them, just being very honest.
So after your time at the college level, right, you bounce out of there, you kind of see what the organized, air quote, level of high level basketball is, and you get into individual training and maybe doing some consultant work with teams. What would you say has transferred from the organized team-based setting to your individual work?
For me specifically,
Yeah, just in general, because it's like there's training, right? What the narrative now is today's players are more skilled than they've ever been, but they don't play enough, and therefore all the stuff they do in the lab doesn't always translate. So whatever, anecdotal, factual, who cares? But what I'm saying is, right, you spent time behind the curtain at the Division I level. You understand what programs look like. And now you're on the other side developing talent to, in theory, help them land at other places. What came with you that you held on to, and what are some things that, like, you know what, that doesn't hold true anymore, and we had to move on from that?
yeah, that's a good question. I think finding the balance is so key. And I think from the team side of things, you're so pressed for time and you only have so much time, right? So you're only allowed 20 hours a week on court with your players in the collegiate level, the Division I level, right? So when I was coaching. And so if you break that down, like it seems like a lot, but it's not. From that's like instructional time, that's videos, you name it, like that takes away a lot. It's all about you have to decide of what's important to you. And from a team perspective, it's like you can only do so much skill development. You like that's what I saw at least. My 1 year at the Division III level, my 4 years at UCF, I was fortunate enough to coach at UConn in 2017, 18. Like you're very strapped for the time and the structure's different everywhere you go. But player development is like, hey, it's put on the players and individuals. If you want to get better, you have to be willing to do that because we only have so much resource allocation. So what I think with that is when it comes to what I learned from that is just like the balance and like the structure of things. And I think a strength of mine is something that I try and instill on a lot of people is we need a team around you of people to be successful. And you need to be very organized in with what you do. And I think that this, I'm not throwing shade at any one individual, but I think on this side of things, trainers, on my side of things, they're very disorganized and they're very just like chasing a trend or they're seeing different things. Like no one is reinventing the wheel of basketball and it's a copycat sport, right? And I think that's important, but you need to understand like your foundational principles and how they apply to the long run, right? So when you have a team, there's a common goal. It's pretty easy. You want to win games, you want to win a conference championship, you want to make the tournament, whatever it may be. And so you work backwards from there, right? And then it becomes systematic. And I think that part is important, but that's what I took out of it is like the systematic approach and like how to develop for that end result, right? Hey, I would always, it's important for me to find offenses that my players are in and to be able to put them in the right positions to be successful, as opposed to just be like, hey, you need this skill or you need to acquire this or work on these different finishes when it's not going to benefit them. And that would be the biggest crossover is it's easy when you're on a team to say, hey, I know exactly what we're running or what we're going against. So let me prepare my players for that. On this side of things, it takes research and time away from the court to step into your player's life, go to their games, talk to their coaches, have those conversations, and to be able to put them in a position to be successful.
I'm glad that you brought that up in regards to the partnership that I think often is ignored. And by that, I mean, we will historically, in my 30 years of doing this, have kids that are working with their trainer.
Right.
And I'll be like, yo, man, I've never talked to this human being. Do they even know what I'm going to have you do? Maybe you should broker that conversation. How would you advise, unpack, share best practices for coaches that are primarily listening to this who are navigating the other side of that
Yeah.
right now, right? Like, how do you as a trainer think through the touch points you have to best help this kid? Because
Yeah.
in the NBA, it's different, right? Everybody runs the same actions. They may be called something else, but you're teaching the same stuff.
Right. That's a good question. I think it's a two-way street. I think there's a misguided relationship or a disconnect that shouldn't even be there between like coaches and trainers, right? Because let's call it a spade. There are a lot of coaches and trainers that maybe shouldn't be where they are. and that's okay. And there's a lot of genius basketball minds who aren't coaching the game of basketball. But nowadays, with a phone and cameras, like anyone can be a trainer, and anyone has access to be like an AU coach just about. And yeah, it takes time to climb and do those things, but I'm not discrediting it by any means, but a lot of different people can walk in the door and get their footings in like a freshman level basketball program, or like they can have a profound impact on kids, right? So it's important that there's people that are trying to be collaborative. I think, and I don't think, I know this, it doesn't matter the level from youth basketball all the way to the NBA. There's a lot of egos in coaches, and a lot of people are trying to prove, hey, look what I can do so I can make it to where I want to go. I think that's a short-term success in it for long-term success. And so what I would say for me, again, it's easy because I've been in both avenues. And that's why I truly think all trainers should coach. And I think coaches should work out their players so they have an understanding of how both things go. But I think it's important for if a coach has players that they know are training with Joe Smith over here and whatever, Troy Johnson over here, they should say, hey, can I get your trainer's contact information? However, and so I'd love to have a conversation with them. And again, that could be very constructive. On the flip side, I put more ownership into the kid and the individual, but it really comes from the trainer. I think it's important to instill your kids having difficult conversations or those leadership type conversations. I think it's important for trainers to say, constantly I let my kids know your coach is right at the end of the day. I'm here to try and help you and teach you and do these things, but I don't control your minutes. And so I think it's important in my community to get in, to just have connections with different coaches. And so when I have a player of theirs, or if they are seeing a pain point with a player and they want to send them to me, like that's good business. Like word of mouth is the best thing you can do. But I think it's important for me to have relationships with coaches and just be like, hey, this is what I'm doing, or what are you running, or what do you value in your program? And seeing those things helps me gain a better understanding. So I think that it comes from all these different avenues. I think it falls on the player to bridge that gap and not to be like, my trainer said this or my coach said this. It's like we have to work in unison to help that individual.
No, that's the best. And that's great, but your trainer doesn't control your playing time.
No,
So
he doesn't. No, he doesn't.
you want to do the things we're working on. All right, so follow up. Man, how do I frame this? We'll just say it. There's a lot of things that are happening in the game of basketball today that don't translate to the high school level yet. There are plenty of athletes that want to try to incorporate these things into their game.
Yep.
Step back, gather step, all this stuff that's a travel. And yeah, I'm going to keep repping this out. It's cool. You're not in the NBA. How do you pick and choose as you're working with kids? How do you filter what you're working with on each level based on ability, based on where they're playing? Because to me, it's just hilarious to watch some of the stuff that goes on in warmups. And it's like, I hope you do that in a game. It's a travel.
Yeah, please do. Please
do that. Go ahead.
That's a great question. I would say, so I would almost challenge high school coaches, and maybe not coaches per se, but high school is actually more similar to the NBA than college. And what I mean by that is that's really if you look at, that's the only place where like kids are going to have more freedom, right? When you get to college, it's very structured and it's very, hey, we're running these sets, these actions. If you don't do it, you're coming out. And it's not every college program, but it's very structured. There's obviously kids need structure and don't really know how to play at the high school level, but there's less like play calling, there's less slowing the game down. So there's a little bit more freedom and creativity. I think you have to look at it in like 12 months scheme. That's how I view these things from a development standpoint. I think in the months of whatever season you want to call it, however long the school season is, down in Southern California, most high school programs, they're like starting July, August, and they go through February, March. So
stop lying. They don't ever stop.
A lot of them don't ever stop, for sure. A lot of them don't. And they have, I don't know how they do it, but they don't. Most schools, though, they're going like 6 months of the year where they're in season. So when I have an individual, a client who's in season, we have to only address the things that you are going to be doing in games. And we're trying to, at that point, continue to highlight your strengths and where can we hide your weaknesses in these areas. And so you got to be able to shoot, you got to be able to defend. What offense are you running? Where are your shots coming from? That is what we're repping out. It is boring. It is brushing your teeth. It is taking your vitamins. It is making sure you are prepared and that you know how to prepare yourself to be successful in games. When it comes to the off-season time, let's just say it's June, July, let's say it's a 2 month period for high school kids, maybe August, let's call it 3 months. So when it's June, July, August, I treat them just like I would treat kind of my professional athletes. It is time to really strip down your game and not work on 1,000 different things, but we have to focus on a few, maybe three maximum different areas of your game and work in depth on those things. So maybe you really struggle at two dribble pull-ups or attacking closeouts, right? So it's like we have to put you in game situations. We have to give you skill acquisition and script these decisions and again, it's like, let's say it's a 90-minute workout. 45 to 60 of that 90 minutes is going to be more like your block training with a little bit of randomization to it. Then we're going to be doing like game shots with closeouts and contests and those things. And then that 30-minute segment is going to be decision making, whether it's one-on-one, two-on-two small-sided games, three-on-three small-sided games, like situations that player or any high school player is going to be seeing time and time again, shooting the three, operating out of the pick and roll, and attacking closeouts. Let's just call it, those are three major aspects of basketball. You can't get enough skill repetition and decision making in those things. So it's important that they see those things time and time again. And then as you get, I tell every single one of my players, no kid at the age of 18 has mastered a skill. So don't tell me that like you've mastered something and I'm moving on. And so being okay with the monotony and understanding those things is so important. And every now and again, you have to have some freestyle and throw some footwork and some different things at them. But that is such a small percentage of skill development. I think as athletes get better, or you can give them a little bit more tools to be successful in certain situations that they're going to be in.
No doubt. All right, let me pivot on this. So as you have, let's say, narrowed your space, right, to from a bigger picture basketball approach to here's what I focus on specifically, skill acquisition, training, skill development. How have you worked to continue to keep a wide lens on your development and growth as a leader? Because you're not necessarily, say you're in the college environment and you got the soccer coach next door, you can go watch practice, you can pick his brain, football's down the hall, whatever. In your space, it's just you're surrounded with basketball 24/7. How are you staying fresh in regards to growth and learning and in your own skill acquisition?
I think that's a great question. I know it's something that I talk to my people in my circle about. It is the hardest thing on this side of things to hold yourself accountable and not even hold yourself accountable, but what is beneficial for me to learn, right? Because when you're in a team setting, take the college team setting, you play 30 games. That's 2 weeks. You're constantly, that output is, you know exactly what you need. And you're surrounded by other coaches. And like you said, you can be like, hey, I'm really struggling to get creative and find ways to do this. I can go to another building or down the hall and talk to the soccer coach, the football coach, and pick their brain on some things. For me, it is leaning on other people, which is huge, is just having a real relationship with people. So I'm not constantly asking for things. I'm just talking about what they're doing, what they're learning, what their program is trying to instill, those different things, and talking through those things. For me, I'm a huge proponent of film. I watch film every day, sometimes too much in a day. But I think film is a great teacher. You can learn so many things from film. You have to know what to look for and what to see and how to break things down. But I'm constantly covering film with my NBA guys, post-game breakdowns, different things. And so that helps me grow and see and study the game and like trends and what's working and those things. But I'm reading, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm on YouTube. There's so many different ways you can learn. And I'm trying to go to I have a good avenue of resources and a good network where I can go pull up to basically any college program in the area and go watch a practice and do those things. So it's all basketball centered. I try and put myself outside of that basketball world when it comes to reading and again, those podcasts and things, but I'm just trying to grow at myself as a leader and within the game constantly so I can output to my kids. I have this thing I like to say, I like to consume every day. So I like to try and learn something new. I try and create every day. So I'm trying to make something, right? Whether that's a post on social media, which isn't like a strength for me, but film edits, like whatever it is, I'm trying to create something. And then I try and challenge myself every day. So what does that look like? A mental challenge, a physical challenge, whatever the case may be. I'm constantly striving to do those things to better myself.
How would you say your background as a lower level staff member at the university has prepared you to do what you're doing now, where generally speaking, being the ops guy, being a manager, doing these things where you got your hands in everything is much more growth oriented than just being at the tip of the spear. How have those things transferred to
Yeah,
what
you
you're
need
doing
to
now?
do that's a great question. When you're at the lower level of those things, when you're a manager, a grad assistant, ops guy, you have to put out fires before they are there. And you learn that very quickly. When a fire gets to the head coach, it falls back, it comes right directly on you. And that is not a conversation that you want to be a part of. So when you just learn to like look for things and things ahead of time at that level and like how to put out fires and how, you have to do everything from academics to the list goes on and on. We can sit here for an hour and talk about the responsibilities you have at that level. I think that just helps prepare you to be a good businessman because into how to run a business and how to conduct yourself because you've put yourself in the shoes of so many different people and you've done so many different odd jobs that you can feel like you can figure out how to run a business. And that's just it.
How would you say your evolution as both a coach and a business person over the last, what are we calling it, 9 years now that you've been on this journey? How would you say that your approach to both of those aspects has evolved?
The evolution in basketball or like
No,
my
sorry, your approach to both teaching the game and being a business person have
yeah.
evolved.
Yeah, so I guess you could say again, I know I'm a good businessman and a business individual, but I'm all about the relationships, right? So there might be opportunities that I miss, or maybe I don't seek them out because I'm so invested in the people I have in front of me. But on the flip side, that has opened so many avenues and I've gained so much trust from my clients. And on this side of thing, business is word of mouth. So it doesn't matter if it's a little 10-year-old or an NBA player. If you truly give that person your undivided attention and treat them like they're the most important person in the world, other people are going to watch and pick up on those things. It's when you get started, it is super easy. We have it every single year. We have kids come to us who are 19, 20 with zero basketball coaching experience. And they're like, I want to coach in the NBA or I want to start a training business and train NBA players. And again, it's our culture. It is end result driven. We see the tip of the iceberg, right? So people don't want to fall in love with that process and understand that it takes a while to get there. And part of that is understanding that, hey, you could be training Rob Pelinka's son without even knowing it. Like you just don't know who you have in front of you. And I think when you have that mentality again and you do such a good job, it just becomes who you are. And that standard stays so high that again, I like I said, I don't seek out business ventures as well as I could, but I'm so invested in my clientele and in growing that like local community that it's infectious and it spreads in a good way. When it comes to basketball, the evolution, the game's always changing. And for me, my primary source of business are my professional athletes. And I know that the NBA game doesn't translate to every level, but there are a lot of things to learn from it. It is the highest level of basketball. It is the best players. Yes, EuroLeague basketball and basketball all over the world is phenomenal. But I just study the NBA game so much and understand that how that operates and trying to apply it. And I think it's important. Like I'm constantly, like I said, I'm going to different practices. I'm watching my kids play games, and so I'm staying up with the current trends of basketball, and so staying relevant in that way.
I'm gonna push back a little bit on something because I want more information. What about the nuts and bolts of operating your business? Not just being able to navigate relationships and grow leads and
Yep,
things
yep.
like that, but oh, shoot, I'm an independent contractor or I got to do this. Talk a
Right.
little bit about what you've learned from that lens, diving headfirst into this pool.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's almost like you never know what you don't know, right? So there are so many things when it comes to operating a business, like accounting, marketing, finance. There's just so many things that you don't think about when you're like, oh, I want to start a business. Community outreach, client outreach. There's so many things that go into it. And it's almost like you might be better off if you could like hire somebody to do those things, but then you don't learn. And so I think it's important it challenges me because sometimes you feel like, I think as you grow in any world, you get pulled away from what you truly love, right? So the more my business expands and I do these things like people employ more people or they step away from the court and they do these things and they have this huge business and they're pulling in all this money, but they're miserable sometimes. Or maybe that's what they want to do, but they're like, man, I did this to start coaching basketball or whatever the business venture is, and now I don't even get to do that thing. So I'm really big on just doing what fills me up to be honest, and making sure that I'm spending time on the court. And I'm constantly getting reached out to by different people who are like, hey, you should be off court, or you can monetize your business and do this and do that. And I'm like, maybe that day will come, but my interest right now is still like my love is still being on court and being in the trenches while I can with my clients. But it's important to carve out that time and to not let those things fall behind because they're very real. Accounting, marketing, like I said, all these different things. Like if you don't water those plants, like they will come back to bite you.
No doubt. And it's funny you say that because I often talk about and joke that when you become the head coach, you're not really coaching your sport anymore. Like 15% of your time, you're coaching, the other 85%, you're doing administrative work. And it's like, if you want to coach, just stay an assistant
Yeah,
because it's a
100%.
different beast. Let me ask this piece about your networking growth outside of your local market, so to speak, right? So for people that aren't aware, you can just give a little primer on your background, your network to Australia, some of the European players you're now working with. But talk, how did that come about? What has your exposure to both international travel and international teaching, coaching, philosophy, etc.? How has that influenced what you're doing now?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think going back to the aspect of your network, when I was coaching in college, I put myself in every single situation to meet people that I possibly could. Attending Final Fours, going to coaching seminars, just putting yourself out there. I think something I try and tell kids all the time is, again, kids are, hey, I want to coach this level or do that. You should never say no to a basketball opportunity because you truly never know who you're going to meet. Right. So go coach at a local high school, do these things. Like you just don't know where that's going to take you. Put yourself out there, go to Summer League in Vegas, go to the Final Four, go do these things. And then when you actually harvest those relationships, like people are willing to help more than you realize. Right. There's very few people that don't want to help others or keep things close to the vest. I still, to this day, I have a really good friend of mine, Zach Gonzalez. He's operates out of LMU's facilities. He does a high level pre-draft and has a summer program. And I try, even with how busy I am and with my clients, I still go up there at least bi-weekly throughout the summer. If not every week, I try and go up and just let me rebound, let me help, let me learn from you or what's going on here. And there's always, it's LA. So there's NBA teams, NBA players, front office. Like you just never know who you're going to meet and how that expands. And you have to put yourself in a situation to be vulnerable and to be seen by these different people and to introduce yourself. And when you do, you better have a presence because they're not going to remember the person that showed up and just worked hard and didn't say a word. You got to bring energy. You should introduce yourself when you walk into a room and there's different things. And it's not like in an egotistical way. You could just walk in, shake your hand, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. Hey, I'm going to get to work and whatever the case may be. So I had a lot of I've been fortunate enough to have the gift of the gab, I was told. I can talk to any person from any background and find a common ground and something to relate and build a real connection and relationship with. Those open doors. And with that, with being around with Jordan and different agents that we've had and different people in our facility, like they come through, we have a lot of international clients. And when they come to visit us, they're like, wow, that experience was so world class. Like, we need to get you to where we were. Or they go back to their countries and the other surrounding organizations and teams realize, hey, that program is doing so well. What they do differently? And again, it falls back on that word of mouth.
What have you learned about teaching the game since you started planting some seeds internationally? What have you brought back? What have you brought that direction? Where do you see the intersection of the world game versus where we are culturally in the States?
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious, everyone who pays attention to basketball and watches the Olympics, that the game of basketball is catching up to us pretty rapidly in a good way. I think that's what you want. Iron sharpens iron. We want the best of the best to bring out the best in each other. I still truly believe that United States has the best players overall. We're a huge country. We have a huge population, and I just think we're far ahead from an athletic standpoint and a resources standpoint in a lot of countries. And that's not to deter or to cast a negative light on any other country. I just think that we are the profound leader when it comes to basketball and the level of skill. I think what's happening is you're starting to see it once you step outside. I think outside of cricket and soccer, I think basketball is the third most popular international sport. I could be wrong with that, but I know it's up there. And so basketball is just growing. I don't think from a number standpoint, it's probably never going to catch those two, which is fine. But you're seeing in other countries, take Australia for an example, have such a strong footprint there. football, their version of football, which is like a hybrid of rugby to for us. Like it's an awesome sport, but in at least in Southern Australia, that is the primary sport. And in the rest of Australia, rugby is the primary sport. So you have these sports, and now you're having a lot of people who are like, hey, you take a country like Australia, they're having a lot of more international, or excuse me, a lot more players from that country reach it to the NBA level, and it's becoming, and then their international team is obviously growing, and the Boomers are competing at a high level with some of the best teams in the country. Everyone looks at that and goes, "Oh my God, that can be me." Like it's possible that if I work hard enough, I can be on that stage because other people in our country are doing it. And so I hope I'm not far off here, and my Australia family might kill me. I think their country has 25 million population. So if you think about it, in America, we're at like what, like 340s. So the chances of making it are exponentially higher if you pick up and the resources are getting there for sure. And I think that it's just cool to see people being like, oh my gosh, Dyson Daniels, Josh Giddey, Patty Mills, whatever the name of the person, Chris Golding, Luke Travers, you name them. These people have done it and are making it. I can do it too. And I think that's just cool to see.
What would you say if I asked you to explain this pre-draft scenario? Dustin mentions it all the time. You've mentioned it when we've talked. I got to get ready for the pre-draft. And it's, hold on. These guys have played a career. What are you going to do in the next 2 weeks that's going to change their draft status?
Right. Believe it or not, a lot. And I mean, it is a 6 to 8 week process. So you really can't do a ton, but you are taking high level players who are very invested because they're like, hey, this is my life now. This is my future. When you get past that college standpoint, it's a business. And maybe you can argue with NIL that is, but whatever. So
that genie is not going back in the bottle, my friend.
no, it's not going back in the bottle. And so when it comes to the NBA pre-draft process, it normally starts in the beginning of April. The combine in Chicago is like the second or third week of May. So you really have a 5 to 6 week process to get them prepared to be in front of the eyes of every NBA front office. The combine is a horse and pony show. No one attempts a layup. It is dunks and threes. So you just really need to see the individual up front and in close. Now, when you're dealing with like the top five, top eight guys, they're dealing with a lot of private close workouts, and a lot of those teams know, hey, we're drafting Victor Wembanyama, we're drafting Cooper Flag. Like those are obvious choices, right? Now, the best way I can explain it is such a short amount of time to shorten the learning curve for the next level because these players are so smart and they're so skilled, but every player at every level has deficiencies. And so it goes back to what we talked about with the youth. It is, how do we make your strengths? How do we put them right in front of all these NBA coaches? And how do we take your weaknesses or your doubts and we hide them, right? Something could be like, hey, we're concerned with his shooting consistency. In 4 to 6 weeks, you can help a player with their shot and their confidence with their shot. So if they go to Chicago or they're going to these workouts and they shoot really well, you just helped make them a lot of money. And or they're okay, maybe they're not a 40% three-point shooter in college, but they're displaying that they've been working on it and that they're capable. And so we're willing to invest in a 19, 20-year-old knowing that, hey, their trajectory we can develop them to shoot. So it is all about helping them understand what the NBA game is like, shortening that learning curve. Hey, here are the common trends you're going to see in the NBA. This is what you're going to be seeing. Prepare you for those things, get them comfortable in a short amount of time. And then how do we highlight your strengths and bury those weaknesses? And that's it.
Yeah, no, that makes a whole lot more sense. What have you observed are the primary driving forces once these teams get to the draft, or even like overseas in the NBL and some of these other deals where they're willing to take a chance on somebody that's raw and unrefined, but an alien in regards to their athleticism versus somebody that is super developed, but it's just going to be an uphill battle in regards to their genetics. Where's the balance in that? I see some crazy decisions, but I'm not behind the curtain.
For sure. I think we'll just take the NBA. I think it's the easiest thing to relate to. I think in the nicest way possible, I think that there's a lot of people again that want to prove that like they know or I'm the smartest person in the room. And so when it comes to decision makers, you can have a now 24, 25-year-old guy coming out of college that you're like, shoot, like he's the man and he's really good. Take Dalton Connect, for example. We'll just use him. What he fell to 17 last year in the draft. And is he pushing the needle on an NBA team? No, he's a specialist and he can really help a team win. And he's really good at what he does. But you take a guy, and again, I am not knocking these players by any means. You take a guy like Reed Shepard, third overall. Okay, what is Reed done that Dalton hasn't done at that level? And again, it's solely based on potential. So these things are swings, and these are, can we hit home runs on these players? Every single team believes, and as they should, if we get our hands on X, we can help and we can change or we can develop them. Like our skill development will work, or like we can help them in our system. And so they want to get their hands on these players who are 19, 20 because they really have a 3 to 4 year span before that rookie contract runs out for first round guys where they can make a profound impact. And it takes not every jump to every level. It takes sometimes a year, if not 2 or 3, to get caught up and for you to really understand like what is this individual's potential. And it's also based on like situations. Take Dyson, for example, Dyson Daniels. Like he's the 8th overall pick going to New Orleans, a very crowded roster. And he didn't really get a fair opportunity to play there, or every time he got his chance, like that he didn't ever have a lot of trust with the organization. And that's not in a negative thing. It's just like you have a short leash in the NBA. It's you got to win games. And if there's like a mistake, coaches are quick to be like, hey, you're out. And so now you throw, yes, he's been developing and he's been working and we've been working on a lot of different things throughout it's a compounding interest type thing. As soon as he got to Atlanta, his situation was different. He's flourished. And now he's a finalist for the Defensive Player of the Year and the Most Improved Player. And so has his skill changed? For sure. But his situation has changed. And I think that's why, again, Dyson just turned 22. Like you take those risks on those 19, 20-year-olds. They don't want the polished 25-year-old because to them in 3 to 5 years, like they're out. Or they know what their ceiling is and they're not willing to settle for that.
Okay, that makes sense now too. All right, last question, and then I'll let you get back to your life. What have you most recently changed your mind on? And this is often framed around coaching. I don't really care if you answer from that lens. I think you got a lot going on that is probably shaking some of the foundations of your life. But I'm always curious how we are maintaining a growth mindset, how we are fighting back against the echo chambers of modern life and challenging our belief system. So
Yeah.
I used to believe this, and now I'm over here.
That's a great question. I think something I've been big on, I've been taking a big dive on lately has been constraint-led approach within player development. I think before it was termed something or had like a scientific approach to it. I've had people that have read about those things or a constraint-led approach, have read about it, have taken like deep dives and have been like, hey, you do it a lot in your training, you just don't realize it. We put our players in situations all the time where they have to problem solve. And that is essentially what that is in a very simplistic way to answer that. So I have something, I guess I've changed my approach or my understanding is I am going away. I still very much believe in it, but I like the term like block training has become so like negative in a lot of ways. But you're seeing there's 2 NBA teams that have taken a recent approach to like the constraint-led approach who have hired guys who have written books on it or who do it. And it's the Cavs and the Grizzlies. And actually the Grizzlies just recently let go of that skill development individual. But at the highest of level, they were able to like get their foot in the door and make an impact. And NBA teams are like, hey, this works. And so for me, we've had people come through our door who are like 100% constraint-led approach. Skill development is terrible, or like, why are you doing these things? And I'm like, listen, you can't. I don't believe in like throwing balloons on a basketball court. No shade to anyone who's ever done that and working on like different things that way. But if that's how you get your players to experience like forced accountability or be uncomfortable, I'm not going to ever throw shade or hate on anyone or what they're doing. But for me, I'm like, okay, I'm starting to lean or understand, embrace a little bit more of this constraint-led approach where it's like, I need to remove myself from always teaching, hear my voice. You need to figure it out more. And so that has been my biggest shift has been like less of me, more of them and understanding what they're seeing on the court and why they're getting to these solutions and learning through them and leading them that way. So that has been my approach has been as opposed to all skill development and having things not mapped out. I don't really template train by any means, but hey, we're going to go in and work on X, Y, and Z. if I'm working on a player and we're trying to instill a couple different finishes and like bump finishing, and then I'm realizing they're not really understanding it, I'm just going to get one of those defender sticks and I'm going to go guard them and I'm going to put them on my inside hip and I'll be like, all right, let's go. Let's first, if I get 10 stops, you get 10 makes first. Let's see who wins. And like, I know I'm going to win. And so they're going to be like, hey, we're drilling all this stuff, but then you do the same finish over and over again because you're comfortable with it. We need to figure out ways to go around that. And that's obviously that block training isn't working. And so I'm trying to change not my entire philosophy, but going more on the side of that constraint-led approach, giving them, hey, those constraints and leading them to finding the solutions on their own.
All right, great. I love that. And I'm going to come back in a second to the question elsewise. But since you just brought that up, one of my biggest frustrations is the transferability of what we train versus what shows up in the games. And ultimately, you're always going to fall to your habits. But how do you get something as simple as a 2-foot finish that you do every single day to show up in the game? Talk a little bit about the secret sauce on that.
I think it's huge. I think you talk about encoding success. What you repeat is what you become. There's that game speed and realism aspect of it that you need. And if, let's say, a 2-foot finishing, we take like a power finish. If it's something that is that important, I'm like, we do a lot of quantitative repetition days where we'll go, okay, put a player on their hip and script it. And it's like, hey, you have 90 seconds straight of 2-foot finishing, jumping into defender's frame, readjusting, finishing. And so they'll do 90 seconds on the right, 90 seconds on the left. And let's say that's the finish you value. Yes, my big guard dog. And so we'll do that. And then we'll obviously expand upon those things, but then we'll put them in a situation and then we'll do a couple other things like, hey, bump, pivot out of pressure, get to a fade, like little things. Okay. If those are the shots you value, you want, you need to rep it a lot. And then you need to put your players in that same situation. Sorry, my golden retriever was being a big guard dog. Love it. Kobe, good job. Yeah, I know. And so what you'll do is then we'll put a player like on the defender's hip and be like, hey, go score. Like we're going to play 1st to 5 and just compete in this setting where it's like very condensed. You got the elbow, you got a player on your hip, you have to score and it has to be off 2 feet. And it's just now let's see what you're willing to do in that setting and just repeating that time and time again, like taking what you value to get it to translate. And then I think it's just highlighting. And then when you get back to that team setting, you can't like slow things down and like, oh, you should have done this here, or okay, those are teachable moments, but just rewarding what you want, like celebrating the crap out of it. So it's like if you're doing a 5-on-5 scrimmage or doing something and your shooting guard goes off of 2 feet and finishes through like the center's chest, you just stop practice, hype him up like you won the championship. And then like little things like that go a long way, I think. And then they realize, hey, shoot, I'm successful when I do that. And that was a good feeling when I was celebrated in that moment.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. All right, back to the other question. I don't want you to talk about basketball. I want you to talk about things that have nothing to do with basketball in regards to things you've changed your mind on. As somebody that's getting ready to be a parent, somebody that's navigating other things in your life, what is something that's not related to coaching or basketball that you've changed your mind on?
I think that's a great question. I think time allocation. I wouldn't say. I know I've always tried to master like my schedule, if that makes sense. And I'm pretty bad at. I think this comes from Tyler Costin. Like you need to write your day down right before you even starts, or it's a failure type thing, right? He learned that from his mentor. And so I'm a big, systematic type person. Hey, I know going into my day what I need to get done, but there's times where life gets in the way and distractions happen, and that's okay. For me, what I've learned is just being able to be intentional with my time and realize that if I don't pour into me first, I can't give my 100% elsewhere. And that's becoming more and more challenging as I have a very pregnant wife and I have a kid on the way and I have a needy golden retriever who needs my attention and like these other areas where it's like my attention needs to go that way. And I also have a business. It's very common, I think, for yourself to put yourself on the back burner when you're going, but that is a recipe for disaster. And so I'm just learning to be selfish almost. And you need to find ways that work for you and like your family structure and those types of things. But I've always been an early morning individual. I'm up at 5:30. If that means that I need to work out then or get my film studying in then or do things before, I'm needed, I think that's important. And so I'm just learning the importance of showing up with good intention, intentionally showing up for other people and having energy in order to do. Because when you don't take care of yourself, that wears on you. And then that's where people get frustrated at other individuals or whatever the case may be. So pour into yourself, be selfish in your time. And like, you need to carve out space for yourself. And then because you're going to have to output so much more, like I'm trying to embrace this crazy no sleep schedule that's coming my way come summer, and I'm ready for it. So I'm just learning how to balance, I would say, and overall.
Love that. We'll put a pin in that with time is your only non-renewable resource. So make sure you know where it's going. Coach, appreciate you coming on today, taking the time. It's been fun. Looking forward to seeing you soon.
Appreciate you having me, Climo.